Good evening. Welcome to our Arapahoe County Town Hall. My name is Roger, and I'll be your moderator tonight. Colorado, like most of the country, has a housing crisis with a deficit in affordable, attainable, and available housing. It is a top priority of your local elected leaders and state lawmakers. What you may not know, however, is that your Arapahoe County Commissioners, in cooperation with local mayors and city councils, has been working on the housing crisis, and we are seeing real success. Your elected leaders are committed to solving the affordable housing crisis and are working together to develop solutions. Tonight, we'll share with you the work that has been done and what's on the horizon. We also have time to answer your questions, and there will be a few ways you can participate if you would like to ask a question. If you're on the phone, press *3. You'll be transferred to an operator who will take down some information and get you in the queue. If you're online, enter your question on the website, and if you're listening, participating on Facebook, send us a comment. Throughout the evening, we'll also ask a few polling questions to learn more about your priorities. So let's get started with the chair of the Arapahoe County Board of Commissioners, Carrie Warren Gully. Good evening, Commissioner.
Good evening, Roger, and thank you and welcome to those of you who are joining tonight. I am joined tonight by my fellow commissioners and several mayors, council members, and staff to talk about the housing crisis. As Roger said, it's no secret that Colorado has a housing crisis. The state has been a top destination for many years, and who can blame people for wanting to move here to our beautiful state? But supply of housing has not kept up with demand, and that's causing some problems for a lot of people. While you're hearing a lot about the crisis, what you may not be hearing a lot about are the solutions that we as a county and our 13 cities and towns have been working on. As local government leaders, we collectively understand and support housing coordination because we also recognize and respect that each of our communities are unique and have unique differences. At the local level, we have lots of tools that we can use to help shape our housing strategy more quickly and efficiently. Tonight, we want to talk with you all about where we are with our housing efforts. We want to share with you some of our successes and also let you know what's happening on the horizon. And, of course, we want to hear from you, too. If there's one thing we hope you take away from tonight's discussion, it's this. Arapahoe County has more than 108,000 new housing units approved and ready to be built today. But we have more work to do, and we want to explain why making these decisions locally is extremely beneficial. We have some information to share with you before we take your calls, but I think right now it's time for a quick poll question. So Roger, can you do that with us?
I sure will, and as a quick reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, press *3 on your phone. Here is that first polling question. It's easy to participate. All you have to do is enter the number of your response in your telephone keypad or click on the website. We'd like to know a little bit about your own housing situation. Press 1 if you own a single-family home. Press 2 if you own a condominium or townhome. Press 3 if you rent an apartment, townhome, or house. And press 4 if none of those three, if some other situation exists. We'll be back to you with the answers in just a bit, but first let's bring on Commissioner Leslie Sume to talk about the housing characteristics of Arapahoe County. Commissioner?
Thank you, Roger, and it's Leslie Sume. Good evening, everybody. It's so wonderful to be here with all of you this evening, and thank you so much for joining us. I get to share this. Arapahoe County has one of the most diverse housing stocks in the state among large counties. So that means that we have a good variety of single-family homes, townhomes, and apartments. In fact, 64% of those housing units are owner-occupied. But we also have a significant number of residents who are what we call housing burdened. And let me go ahead and tell you what that term means. So 1 in 3 residents, that's over 88,000 of you, pay more than 30% of your income to live for your housing. That's a 13% increase. since 2016. And that's why we need more affordable housing and certainly more diverse housing stock. You did hear Commissioner Warren Gully say that we have 108,000 housing units approved and ready to be built. So that's housing for at least 284,000 individuals. And that's important because our census projections tell us that Arapahoe County will have more than 800,000 residents by 2050. We are well on our way to bringing more development online. But why are approved units taking so long to be built? I hear you asking that question. There are lots of reasons. Labor and supply chain shortages, developer priorities, financing backlog for affordable housing projects that result in increasing capital costs due to market conditions. There are also significant infrastructure costs like water and sewer that need to be built for both new and infill housing projects. We also lack safe and reliable public transportation to make transit-oriented development less car-dependent. So the bottom line, local oversight takes time to ensure that housing is safe for all within our community. We also make sure services and infrastructure for new housing is readily available. But before we get into all of that and the next thing, let's do another poll question. Roger, back to you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Here's that question. We want to know if you think we're on the right track or the wrong track with our housing efforts. Using your telephone keypad, just like all the other polls tonight, press 1 if you think we're on the right track, and press 2 if you think we are on the wrong track. Again, 1 if you think we're on the right track, and 2 if you think we are on the wrong track. Let's go now to Commissioner Jeff Baker. Commissioner, go ahead.
Thank you, Roger. Hi, everyone. Good evening to you all. Local governments have been adapting our zoning and updating master plans, advancing projects to address community needs and character. We do this by working with our land code. It's kind of like if you've ever played Monopoly or SimCity, but instead of buying Baltic Avenue and putting a hotel on it, there are many different kinds of rules and regulations that we can adjust to guide development in the way that will fit in with each individual neighborhood. I want to share just a few examples of what I'm talking about. Arapahoe County has what we call middle housing. Those are duplex and triplexes, and they're already allowed in certain zone districts and planned unit developments across the county. Littleton, for example, recently passed an inclusionary housing ordinance that requires at least 5% of new residential developments with at least 5 units to be affordable. Other cities are considering similar approaches. Accessory dwelling units, or ADUs, sometimes called mother-in-law apartments, are permitted in Aurora, Bennett, Cherry Hills Village, Englewood, Littleton, and Sheridan. Let's take a few questions from our audience before hearing from our mayors about their individual experiences. Roger?
All right. Again, if you'd like to ask a question and you're on the phone, press *3. We'll get you in the queue. We're going to hear first from Laura. Laura, go ahead.
Yes. Have you considered a constitutional amendment keeping all local zoning, not just housing, within the control of local communities? Local government are responsible to their citizens.
Thank you for that question, Laura. This is Mayor Stephanie Pico from the city of Centennial, and we have not considered a constitutional amendment for that because we have not seen a threat to our local zoning in the past as we are at this point in time. So that would be an option for citizens to be able to take up an initiative to have that go across the state, and for voters to actually have a say in that. And if an initiative like that did pass, then that would override anything that the legislature had regulated.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's hear next from Jack. Jack, go ahead. Jack, you're live. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize I had to talk. Well, my question was on ADUs. I'd really like to see the ADU initiative get through. I listened in on the meeting the other day, and there's quite a few issues that still need to be resolved on the small properties. And I think if the 19 acres and above was able to go ahead and get pushed through, that would help a lot of people. There's an awful lot
Jack,
of
this
people.
is Jeff Baker. I believe I'm your commissioner.
Yes.
I think the meeting you're referring to is the meeting of the Planning Commission. And we have proposed, when I say we, in Arapahoe County, we proposed adding zoning and requirements and allowing ADUs to be completed countywide. And so I think that my district out in the eastern part of Arapahoe County, which has 19-acre properties or larger, sometimes 5-acre properties, that may make a lot more sense than in the already dense urban areas, such as in Commissioner Summey's area. And her district has already some pretty high density, not as big as the density in District 3. So that's something that I take that suggestion to heart, and our planning commissioners, I'm sure that they will be considering that as well as a way to maybe get something passed here shortly. Thank you for your question, though.
All right. Thank you. Let's go next to Sheridan Mayor Tara Bitterfleur, who's going to talk a little bit about some things going on in her city. Mayor, you may be muted.
Can you hear me now?
There you are. Go ahead.
Okay. This is Mayor Tara Bitterfleur from Sheridan, and I'm really glad to speak with you all today about Sheridan's affordable housing efforts. To give you a little bit of context, Sheridan has a population of about 6,100 people in 2 square miles. We're at the far western edge of Arapahoe County, west of Englewood and south of Denver. And we are a landlocked area. So any change we make to add affordable housing, we're also adding density. Our community is very supportive of affordable housing. It's a mainly working to middle class community, and our residents can have trouble meeting their housing costs or have found that housing costs are taking up more and more of their resources. And so we hear from them that they want more affordable housing and truly affordable housing for people who are in similar economic situations to them or even worse off. So I wanted to share some of our recently completed and ongoing projects. First of all, Sheridan Square was developed by Habitat for Humanity of Metro Denver. It added 63 units of townhome housing for about 355 people, and that was completed in 2019. Second, we have in the works a redevelopment of the Bonsai Nursery on South Federal Boulevard. The owner generously sold the site at a below market price to a developer, and they are developing the Bonsai Flats apartments using financing that includes the state low-income housing tax credits, which is a type of program that I think we really can use the state to even support more. They will be building 149 units, all restricted to being rented to people who fall between 30 and 60% of AMI, and that'll add about 600 to 800 more people in Sheridan. Thirdly, we're in pre-development discussions with the Housing Authority for Englewood. They happen to own some lots in the city of Sheridan, and they're anticipating adding 23 new affordable units. So, with these projects, we are definitely densifying up, and I really point this out to show how hard our city is working to increase affordable housing without any mandates from the state. As Commissioner Baker mentioned, we also passed a very permissive accessory dwelling unit ordinance in 2021. So in conclusion, I just want to say we're aggressively engaged in increasing housing stock, but especially affordable housing. You're going to hear more later from Mayor Katie Brown about Senate Bill 23213. And I just am trying to, get across the point that cities in Arapahoe County are really pushing already for affordable housing, truly affordable housing. And you'll hear about Senate Bill 23213, which does not actually guarantee that any housing will be affordable. So municipalities like Sheridan are making sure that the housing they welcome to their communities are affordable to the people living there and don't displace their current residents. So thank you so much, Commissioners, and thank you for everyone listening for giving me the opportunity to share our experience. I'd be glad to answer any questions when that time comes. For now, I'm going to hand it over to my esteemed colleague, the Mayor of Centennial, Stephanie Pico.
Thank you, Mayor Biter-Fleur. I appreciate the chance to have an opportunity to provide some context on really how municipalities approach land use. Municipalities refer to what we call home rule authority, which through the Colorado Constitution allows for cities and their residents to provide community-specific solutions to address local issues. Centennial has recently engaged with our residents on several large housing projects, like the streets at Southglenn and the district. Between the streets at Southglenn and the district, we're looking at adding an additional 3,000 units to our community. That process allowed for the opportunity to engage with citizens, the developer, and the city to work through project proposals together to amend projects to meet the needs of our community. Even though not every citizen is happy with the outcome, they had the opportunity to have their concerns heard by their local officials who can be held accountable for the outcomes of the development. Currently, as Mayor Biter-Fleur mentioned, there is legislation, Senate Bill 23213, that has the goal of eliminating the city's and therefore the citizens' voice in local land use planning, taking away a constitutionally protected right, the right of home rule. I have no doubt that citizens will be hearing a lot about this in the next couple of weeks and the details about this bill. But part of this bill requires a housing study. The City of Centennial has already been engaged in a housing study for the past year. We have worked with a citizen working group, had public meetings, outreach opportunities to assess the needs of our community. Now is the time where we will be working to develop policy, which may include some changes to land use. But in order to generate the diversity of housing that we need, and we need to create the options for our Centennial residents. But any policy changes that we will make will have the voices of our citizens included in that outcome. One of the housing opportunities we'd love to support is the construction of condominiums and townhomes. To meet the need, we have identified in our community as a lower price point of opportunity for entry into home ownership. One challenge we all face for that is to be successful is what we refer to as construction defects litigation. Years back, the legislature created an environment that made building condominiums and townhomes risky and cost prohibitive for developers. This has put an additional strain into the lack of affordable housing in Colorado, but the legislature has not proposed any solution to this issue, and that is very concerning for those of us who appreciate seeing the option in our communities. So as you can see with the slide with the district, you can tell what kind of projects we're looking at in the City of Centennial, and that we also, along with our neighbors, have been working to try to solve some housing solutions for our community and bring the right mix of housing into the City of Centennial. And with that, Roger, are you ready for questions and answers?
We are. We're ready to do some Q&A. Again, encourage you to press *3 on your telephone keypad to get in line and submit your questions online from the website. We are going to first hear from Eric. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, I live in Inglewood, and my property here has a historic carriage house, and it's very affordable rent for the person that lives there. My question is, in Inglewood, and I'm specifically talking about zip codes 80113 and 80110, if somebody owns a property that they rent out, if they build an ADU, then the city is making them sign a sworn affidavit that they're going to live in the ADU or the main house 9 months a year. Is there anything on the going on that would allow somebody who owns an investment property to build an ADU and not live in one of the two properties in order to help the affordable housing situation?
Mayor Sierra, you want to take that one?
I can. Let me know if you're able to hear me.
We are.
I can hear
Go
you.
ahead.
Perfect. So good evening, Eric. This is Nathaniel Sierra, Mayor for the City of Inglewood. That's one of the things that we're considering. So right now, Inglewood, the City of Inglewood, City Council is going through our Title 16 rewrite, which is our Unified Development Code. We codenamed it Code Next. But one of the things that we're looking at is, one, allowing ADUs throughout all residential areas. Right now, it's allowed in some single-family areas, as well as multifamily and some of our other mixed-use districts. But we're looking at allowing ADUs throughout the entire city. The other aspect that you're asking about is about allowing ADUs for short-term rentals. That is something that we are considering as well. Currently, you are not allowed to use an ADU as a short-term rental. So we are looking at that as well as part of this code rewrite. I think I have to take a look back, but I think we're looking at different options. I think right now it's either one or the other. Well, right now you're not allowed to use ADUs as short-term rentals. But the other aspect that we're looking at is that maybe we could allow short-term rentals there and keep the owner as part of the primary residence. But we're looking at also providing the flexibility that the primary owner would live in the ADU and rent out their primary residence. So we're looking at all options in terms of ADUs.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's go to an online question that was submitted by Pam. Pam asks, what measures are being taken to prevent vast numbers of homes being purchased by companies or people who do not live in them? Commissioner Campbell-Swanson, do you want to take that?
Of course. Thanks, Roger, and thanks for the question, Pam. Nice to see you on. Currently, as we are looking at our housing, and our county is also doing a housing study as well as with a water study, and we're looking at the whole impact of everything going on with housing and where we are. One of the things we will be doing is, like Inglewood, we're looking at how we can limit short-term rentals, and we are starting with short-term rentals in this category, and with our ADU proposal, are suggesting that ADUs that go up will not be available for short-term rentals. And then short-term rentals generally, we are looking at limiting them very dramatically to maybe 6 months. It has to be at least 6 months, owner-occupied, different things there. And we just had a study session just a couple weeks ago, and we're looking forward to our Public Works and Development Department bringing back proposals based on the questions and guidance we gave them. And then after that, we will be looking at measures to incentivize and then tackle that broader issue of corporations buying homes as they go on the market. We will also be looking at and potentially working with the state legislature, working just with our own departments here, if we are putting up any deed restricted homes or anything like that, to look at making sure they're going to individual owners. But a lot of that is stuff that is work in the process and things that we will be looking at but we are aware that it is an issue, and we're kind of taking it piece by piece, Pam, but looking at the broader picture as we go so that all things sync up. So there's a couple steps in that process, and we're tackling it, and we want to get the people who live here into homes. So that's what we're working on.
Thank you, Commissioner. Let's hear from Susan on the phone next. Go ahead.
Thank you. First, I wanted to start by thanking our local elected officials for convening this conversation. It's a really important topic and certainly timely. My question's about transit. We keep hearing a lot about the importance of transit-oriented development in the context of affordable housing. I live near the 9 Mile station, and I have to tell you, it takes me a really long time to get to work. I'd really love to see better transit service in the area, and I'd love to hear somebody share their thoughts on that for me.
Commissioner Holman.
Thank you, Roger. Transit is a very important element in many respects. One, it's important to be able to lessen the burden of traffic on the freeway and in our arteries into downtown Denver or throughout the county where people work. Secondly, the county is very supportive of transit-oriented development because we play a very significant role in helping develop housing in and near transit centers so that we can encourage the use of mass transit rather than the automobile. The other positive thing about transit is that mass transit is that it will eventually significantly reduce air pollution and the emission of greenhouse gases that are having an impact on climate change. With respect to specific plans, the federal legislation in the infrastructure bill is providing funds to be used in forms of finding alternative transit modes, such as improvements as we do with our open space and trails, and also providing the last mile services to transit connections. So all those issues come together, and it's something that we as county commissioners are all supportive of for those reasons. So I'm very positive about us finding some improved ridership on our rail system, as well as better schedules for our buses, which are becoming more environmentally sensitive.
All right, let's hear from Katie next. Go ahead.
Hi, so I live near Arapahoe and Broadway, and there's been a lot of work that's being done on the Broadway changes from 25 down to Highlands Ranch Parkway, and our area is part of the initial changing of zoning on Broadway. And in speaking with some of the realtors and real estate lawyers in the area, they believe that the changes that are being suggested will drastically decrease the price of our home. And right now there's a zoning, with the zoning that we have, it's a sign that states that if a neighbor decreases the value of your home, they have to compensate you. Will that be in place if the changes do come through and the zoning changes? And then it does decrease the value of our home? Is that something that we'll be compensated for?
Commissioner Warren-Gully, do you want to hear first?
Sure. Hi, Katie. This is Commissioner Warren-Gully, and thank you for joining us this evening. This is a good question, and I don't know, to tell you the truth, the specifics around any type of compensation, but I will tell you that what we are talking about this evening is some proposals that are being put forward at the state legislative level. And so one of the important things that we feel in working with our partners in our cities and towns is that it gives local communities the ability to work on their zoning and the issues that face their community that are very specific and unique to the town or the city or the unincorporated part of Arapahoe County. We do want to make sure that we can house the people that live here and work here in Arapahoe County in a way that doesn't overburden them for housing costs. But the changes that we are talking about, some of the up zoning, what we're talking about of adding more density into some areas, is a proposal that is being presented down at the state capitol. And that's why we're really wanting to have this conversation tonight, is to let you know that we support local decisions around those zoning matters. And so if you have, this is a perfect kind of question that I might present to a state legislator that will be dealing with this bill as it has been introduced and going through the state legislature. So I would recommend and encourage you to bring this up with your state legislators so that we can see how they respond to that and how our density might affect our communities and outside of the local decision making.
Thank you. All right, here's a question submitted online that maybe Commissioner Baker could handle. Annette writes, will you be open to granting review fees for affordable housing projects that have been unaffordable in the past?
Thank you, Roger, and thank you for the question, Annette. I think the question is, are we considering having reduced fees through our Public Works Department for plans review for certified affordable housing? That's something that I think we can consider. I don't think we've done a lot of study on that, but that's a great suggestion. Our plans review fees are intended to just cover our expense, the amount of time our employees spend reviewing those. And I will also add that not only does our staff review those, our engineering and planning group review those fees, but we have fire departments that, like the Byers Fire Rescue Authority, will review those projects that are out in Byers. We have review from water entities. We have reviews of parking and all the traffic impacts for that affordable housing too. So there are costs that go into that, but to answer your question, I believe we probably would consider reduced fees at some point if we can get that done so that it's consistent across the county. Thank you for your question, Annette. Back to you, Roger.
All right, let's do one more online question from Orlando that perhaps our esteemed mayor from Littleton could answer. Orlando asks, as we know, pollution doesn't know municipal borders. So how can we ensure that every municipality is doing their part and working together to address the housing and climate crisis?
That's a great question, Orlando. Thanks for asking that. I can assure you that all of our communities talk regularly to each other. The mayors all talk quite frequently. And more important, our city staff works very closely with each other's city staff to make sure that everyone knows what they're doing. Because, here in Littleton, and I can say with all the other communities, that our environment is of the utmost importance to all of us. So we want to make sure we keep it as clean and pristine as we possibly can. So it's really important that we know what other communities are doing, and so we can keep doing that. Specifically, each of our communities have different aspects when it comes to pollution and the environment. The South Platte River here in Littleton through Englewood and Sheridan, we work very closely together with the water quality there with our South Platte Renewable Water Plant. But as a part of that, almost all the communities in the South Metro area flow into that. So it's really important that we know what's going on there. And when it comes to housing, it's equally as important as well, because we want to know with our commercial businesses to figure out where they get to go based on where people are living. So it's important for us to know what other communities are looking at in terms of housing. And so it's something that I think it's really eye-opening being a part of the government to see how much our city staff works with other city staffs as well as the county staff. So it's a great question. Thank you for that.
All right, it's time now to go back to Commissioner Campbell Swanson, who's going to talk a little bit about, I think, homelessness. Commissioner?
I think that is Commissioner Bill Holen is going to talk about homelessness and the great work that the county has done with our.
Hello?
Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you very much. Another piece of the housing crisis is finding quality, long-term solutions to homelessness, which, as you all know, got worse because of the pandemic. But we have been the ability to provide some short and long-term housing resources to our neighbors by using some of the one-time funding that was provided through the American Rescue Act, ARPA. We're currently working across the county to coordinate homelessness response and programs offerings, including expanding shelter options, providing eviction support services, and expanding our Navigator programs, which help homeless people get through the morass of programs that are available to them. We have been able to do some amazing work with these federal funds, but they're one-time use, so we need to find a sustainable revenue source to continue these critical programs. Let's take some more calls, Roger.
All right, let's do that. Next up is, we'll hear from Sally next. Go ahead, Sally.
Yes, I would like to know what all of the new building is going to do to our water shortage situation and what is going to be done about it.
That's a great question, Sally. And, Roger, I see my name. It's been assigned to me, so I'll just jump in here and take that for us here. And Sally, that's a really great question. And as noted earlier when I was answering the question about Pam's question, we are doing a water study, and all of the bills that are coming from the state are also thinking about that water issue. So in our water study, just so you know, we are looking at 2050 projections, and we will be, which is the same as the state, so we'll be lined up with that for any potential legislation coming down the pipeline. And the thing about density and what's happening with density is that they will have, there's no lawns, or there are fewer lawns or smaller lawns. And I think it's something like 40% of water used in our Denver metro area goes to our lawns. So by contemplating our growth and providing for density, we actually, because our growth is coming, we've got those projections that by current projections hold that by 2040, Arapahoe will grow from where we are now at 655 people to 875,000 people, 655,000 to 875,000, that we will move to, that's coming. So as we're planning for that growth, density will help us manage our water. And the water study that we're doing will let us know our level of urgency that we need to address water use. We're planning for it. We're studying it, and hopefully with increased density, ADUs and some of these other things that we're talking about, condos, townhomes, and all of that, will help us make sure that we're using our water most efficiently.
All right, thank you. It's Roger's turn next. Go ahead, Roger.
Hi, I have a two-part question, I guess you could say. I would like to know what the definition of affordability is, because I'm sure it's different from buyers and what's affordable in Littleton or Inglewood. And maybe the second part of that question is who's going to determine what's affordable?
Roger, this is Katie Brown, the mayor of Cherry Hills Village, and thank you for asking the million-dollar question, pardon the pun. Affordable housing generally starts with the concept of the area median income, which is AMI for short. Generally, and every community can have its own AMI, or you can do regional AMI, so it's a bit of a moving target, but you start with the area median income, and generally speaking, people who make 80% of the area median income are considered low income, and it goes down from there. 50% is considered very low income and keeps going. So once you've kind of established who your target is, if your target is income restricted housing, you know about how much this group of people makes, and then you apply some percentage of that you feel is reasonable for them to spend each month on their housing. That number a lot of times is around 30%, but the bottom line is that there is no standard definition of affordable housing, quote unquote, and I think it's really important to note that right now, local governments and developers on kind of a project-to-project basis can identify different targets. For example, the city of Denver is working on housing projects for people who have 60% AMI, which is lower than the standards that other people might have. So it can vary across the board. I think it's really important that local communities, your local governments, and each developer has an opportunity. Obviously, the AMI in Cherry Hills Village is very different than in Bennett. And so you need the opportunity to see what makes sense for your community. But no one really knows, and particularly in the context of Senate Bill 213, there are no guarantees that any of housing built as a result of that are required to be affordable. So I guess we'll have to wait and see what the definition of affordable housing turns out to be in that context.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's go to Pamela next. Pamela, go ahead.
Hi, I had a question about the homeless, and you just addressed it, and so I thank you for it. It doesn't sound like it truly have an answer, but at least you're aware that it's out there and needs to be addressed. So I thank you for that. But since my question was answered, in the Denver Post today, I saw how Arapahoe were losing people. So are you factoring that into that we're not going to overbuild, and people are leaving us, and why are they moving out of the area?
Commissioner Warren.
Pam, thank you so much for the question. I have to admit, I did not read that article in the paper today, but I will tell you that as Commissioner Campbell-Swanson just mentioned earlier on answering the previous question, that the 2020 census estimates that by 2030, we will be at 835,000, I want to say, and that is well over 200,000 more residents living in Arapahoe County, putting us almost as the most populous county in the state, depending on what the growth in other counties are. So although we, I think in general, we see there are differences in how that's calculated. The census does not see us as going down in population, and that is why we are doing such extensive planning around trying to do this growth in the most sustainable way so that our residents and our community continue to have a wonderful place to work live and raise our families in. So I did not see those numbers, but I do know that that's certainly different than what our expectations are.
All right, we'll hear from Lena next on the phone. Go ahead.
Hi. I have definitely a two-part question. I guess it starts with that I sold my house 2 years ago, and at that time I was working with the county, and they had told us that it would be about a year for us to pass the new regulations with the ADUs. And now we're at 2 years, and the regulations and ADUs have not passed. At that time, I did a survey of over 100 people at King Soopers and Bennett, because now we are currently in Watkins. So we are on large property. And during that survey, I had asked questions, and they said that everybody was in favor of the ADUs except 2 people. So my question is how can we get these regulations passed? Because I feel like 2 years is a very long time that we've been waiting to build our house. And then I guess the other part to the question is can we separate it? Because the issues when I listened in on the meeting the other day, when they didn't pass the regulations, were all the issues were with people that lived in the city limits. So if we can get these regulations passed, how soon do you think we can do that? And can we get it separated between large properties and people that live in the city? Because obviously we don't have the same issues. It had sounded like everyone was in favor that was on property. So how can we allow
this
people...
is Commissioner Baker. And
yes.
I'm going to try to answer that question because I think Jack, the previous caller, had somewhat similar question concerning the size of the properties and ADUs. And you're right, we may eventually have to just specify that they're allowed on properties of a certain size. We've been trying to get this done countywide, and there's a reason for that. We try to do things so that our staff doesn't have to think about, well, they live here, so these rules apply to them, and they live over here, so they have a different set of rules. We wanted to have the same set of rules, but we know that one size does not fit all. Some of these areas will embrace and love the idea of the ADUs. They'll start right away, while neighborhoods of single-family homes are wary of the increased density and traffic that these ADUs will trigger. We're trying to get regulations done countywide. We don't want a patchwork quilt, so to speak, of rules going across the county. But we do acknowledge that one size does not fit all. So you're right. That may be where we have to head. Excuse me. The Planning Commission is considering those ADUs right now. Thank you for your question.
Okay, we'll hear from Stephen next. Go right ahead.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I have a question, I guess. I live in the South Bend area, or the streets of South Bend, and I'm thinking, and I'm listening to you guys, all the things you are speaking about, and as I'm sitting here, I start running numbers in my head, and I'm like, okay, traffic, it's only a 2-lane, on each side, throughway on Arapahoe, University, Broadway, and as you start to throw these numbers out, I'm going to add 500 units here. Even federal for the Sheridan people. I'm going to add 500 units here, 1,000 units here, blah, blah, blah. That's that many more cars you're adding to that area. And in a lot of these areas, especially like on Arapahoe, from Broadway down to Hawley, there's no room for really expansion on adding that much more. And traffic's already miserable as it is going across town during rush hour and those busy hours that most people are on the road. So what is the plan for existing neighborhoods? I mean, I could see, and the last caller's point is like, they're not going to have that concern. If they're sitting on land, if they're sitting on 5, 10, 15 acres and they're waiting to build, that's going to be different because the density is not there. But if you're going to use apples to apples, it's not the same because this is a denser area. Your per capita per people is way different. Everything is going to be different. So as I sit here and listen to you guys and you folks that are elected talk, I know you don't want a patchwork of laws between one area and the next, but the rules don't apply the same, especially when you start looking at density. When somebody's sitting on 5 acres, their next neighbor's 5 acres away, versus right now I could throw a rock and I hit 2 or 3 neighbors, right? So, adding the more MDUs, multiple dwelling units, into established neighborhoods, in my opinion, one, is going to drive your local traffic up, which is going to cause people to move out into more rural areas. So you're going to lose people that way. And two, you don't know what element you're bringing in as well with the lower income housing, which I know that sounds crazy, but
Stephen, thank you. I think Mayor Pico is going to address your question. Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Stephen, and I appreciate the points that you brought up in your question. One of the things that you'll see that local municipalities require is a traffic study for every development that's presented to the city. And those traffic studies project out and have a lot of opportunity for citizens to have input in them. And I will use the streets at Southland as a very specific example. We had a single resident come up with a change in how a left turn should be configured going into the streets at Southland, and that was considered by City Council and added to the plan. So citizens have that input. I can't stress enough that Senate Bill 213 will take away every bit of citizen input into any of that traffic that's going on in that area. So whether it's an interchange like I-25 and Arapahoe Road, or an area that's closer to the community and smaller housing areas, without that local input, we won't be able to examine how those developments will impact our communities. And we work hard to make sure we understand that before we approve anything.
Okay, let's quickly hear from Danny next. Danny, go ahead.
Yeah, I found myself in the situation of living in my van and not being able to afford housing for the last 5 years. And I was wondering if you had any suggestions on how to make the transition from a car back to some type of affordable housing.
Thank you. I'll take that one. Danny, this is Commissioner Leslie Summey, and thank you so much for that question. And I can just tell you that Arapahoe County truly is a wonderful place to live, and here is what you can do. We have great partnerships with community providers that can provide assistance to individuals in the situation. And I'm just so grateful and proud for those resources. And we also have those resources right at our county offices. So what we would recommend is that anyone who is transitioning from their vehicle to being housed, that they reach out to Arapahoe County's Community Resources Department, specifically to our housing navigators, and that those folks can work to connect you with the resources that you need to transition effectively. And those resources include connections to public assistance, to housing, and employment services. And so many people, again, Danny, I'm grateful for that question. So many people don't know what Arapahoe County has to offer. And that is one of the things. So reach out to Arapahoe County's Community Resources Department, specifically to our housing navigators. They can work with you to connect the resources that you need to transition effectively, including connections to public assistance, housing, and employment services.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Now it is time when I should have called on Commissioner Campbell Swanson, and I misspoke earlier. Commissioner Campbell Swanson, do you want to talk a little bit more about this state legislation?
I would love to, Roger, absolutely. So as we all know, our state legislature has been working to tackle our housing crisis from their end as well. And the county has been very engaged with the legislative process through organizations representing the county at the Capitol and directly with our Arapahoe delegation at the legislature. There are some really interesting and innovative bills out there that would protect renters and give local governments additional tools to directly engage in providing affordability. And we appreciate the permissive options and tools that we can look at moving forward so that we can continue to have that local hands-on approach to affordability. Now, as discussed, and in particular, if you haven't heard, there is legislation from the governor's office with our legislators came out last week. And for those that don't know, I did work at the state legislature as the chief of staff for one of our legislators, and I have focused on housing policy for a while. So I was excited to dig in, and I have read the entire 106 pages of the bill. So I think that's why I got assigned this task to break it down for us today. So as presented, Senate Bill 23213 is the number. And generally, the goal of the bill is to generate affordability by relying on a supply-side approach of housing by changing zoning so as to allow for greater density across our metropolitan municipalities. They are using the HUD definition of affordability, which means that housing is affordable when it constitutes no more than 30% of your net income. And as noted, the bill does primarily apply to our metro municipalities, but it also requires coordinated state, regional, and local planning on strategic growth objectives. Now, those strategic goals and objectives and required zoning changes rely most heavily on state agencies to establish minimum standards for housing types that would then apply to the categorized relevant municipalities, which is a lot of the municipalities in Arapahoe County. So in our municipalities, those minimum standards would zone existing residential areas for ADUs, accessory dwelling units, duplexes, townhomes, and multiplexes up to 6 units. It would prevent additional parking requirements for such units, relying heavily on transit-oriented development, and it would establish minimum density requirements for multifamily housing near those transit stops and what they're calling key corridors. So the county is very supportive of the goal of the legislature to increase housing stock and specifically to increase stock of our affordable housing. And we know that they're balancing many factors in perspective. We do have some broad and specific concerns with the bill, and we'll be engaging in the legislative process and connecting with our legislators to help this bill achieve its goal, as well as we all work together to make sure everyone in Arapahoe County has access to affordable and attainable housing. It's a very interesting bill. It's broad-reaching, and it mainly applies to our municipalities. So to hear more about our municipalities, here is Mayor Katie Brown to talk about the municipal perspective.
Well, thank you. You've just heard a lot about the great work that's being done to address housing needs locally in Arapahoe County. You've heard about the smart and collaborative planning and development that takes into consideration the unique communities in our county. But this bill would put an end to all of that by taking decision-making out of the hands of local communities and giving it to the state. Community development is governed by zoning, which basically tells you what you're allowed to build on your property. Some lots are zoned single-family residential, some are multifamily, some are commercial or industrial. This is called use by right, and it basically means that you don't need permission to use your land in the way in which it is zoned. And zoning is currently created by local governments with extensive input from their communities. By allowing increased density on any single-family lot as a use by right, This bill takes away a community's ability to situate housing where it makes sense, where it can be sustainable for things like water and sewer. Questions like, are the pipes underground big enough to handle the increased volume of water and, well, frankly, poop that has to go down them? Are the roads and traffic, are the roads wide enough to accommodate the travel, parking, and emergency vehicle access? My community still has some narrow dirt roads. It wouldn't make sense to build an apartment building there, but we might be required to do so under this new legislation. This bill does not consider or make allowances for increases in essential services like schools, fire protection, and law enforcement. Where will we put new schools and who's going to build them? Who will pay to increase our law enforcement to serve more people, and where's that money going to come from? Most importantly, as Mayor Pico mentioned earlier, this bill takes away your voice. Our local processes include multiple opportunities for residents to be involved with zoning. This bill bypasses all of that with no public input. Land use and zoning has been done by local governments for more than 100 years for a reason. Your locally elected government understands the unique needs and desires of your community. We know where the traffic problems are. We know where the school bus stops are. We know where the floodplains are. No state agency could ever know that much about every city in Colorado, and they can't be treated the same, as many callers have pointed out. Your local government deals with those details every day, and we are accountable to you. If you don't like the job we're doing, you can vote us out. But if you don't like this new zoning, you don't have a say, and neither do we. So what does this mean for you? To be blunt, this bill means that you could have up to 6 homes on the lot next door to you, towering over your home, with no limit to how many people can live in each one of those homes, and no parking requirements. Neither you nor your locally elected government will be able to do anything about it. Oh, and did I mention that none of them are required to be affordable? This top-down, one-size-fits-all approach is not a solution to Colorado's affordable housing crisis. The local collaborative approach that is working in Arapahoe County, and we need more of that across the state. And with that, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Warren Gully.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. I really want to thank everybody on the call this evening for being here and having this important conversation with us. We realize that we have shared a lot of information with you tonight, and we want to thank you for sticking in there with us. This is a really important issue to us all, and housing is very central to everything we do in our life. And that's why local governments, like your Board of County Commissioners and the mayors and city councils, find that the work that we do is incredibly important to us. We are proactively responding to the changing needs of our communities every day. So we realize, as Mayor Brown said, that a one-size-fits-all approach is not going to work in Arapahoe County or in the metro area, because what we need to do is address housing affordability, accessibility, and diversity. So we look forward to having more meaningful conversations about this topic, and we urge you to get involved. You can certainly call your state representatives and let them know how you feel about the bill that has been introduced around housing. You can also catch up on all of our websites around the great work that our cities and towns are doing. We thank you again for joining us, and I want to personally thank our cities and towns for cooperating with us on this call today.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. On behalf of Arapahoe County and all of your local municipal leaders that have joined us tonight, have a good evening.